Hey, hey, hey. There we go. Come on in here, folks. Come on in. Yeah. Yeah, that's what I like to see right there. Come on in here, folks. Come on in. Yeah, this is what I'm talking about right here. Had a little bit of technical difficulty. Had a little bit of technical difficulty. Yeah, there we go. Getting some shout outs. There we go. Come on. Say your name, where you're from. So on my side, if you leave in the comments, I can see your comments, but I can't. Oh, I know who Pastorius is. I ain't even worry about that. I ain't even worry about that Pastorius. I already know who that is. Um, but anybody else, leave your name. Leave your name, where you're from. Just do it. Hey, I just want to see where you're from because I can't see your name on this side. All right. Leave your name, where you from. All right, you know what? Matter of fact, don't worry about it. I'm over here. I'm moving and grooving over here. All right, I'm moving and grooving, moving and grooving. Hey, say what's up to the people, man. I got my aunt on my wife's side. Aunt Murray in the building. Cam, I see you, bro. Melissa T, you already know. You know what I mean? Luke Stamps in the building. Got you. Got you. Timothy Torres, good to see you, bro, all the way down in Boca representing. All right. You know what I mean? Brooke, we got all kind of folks in here. Malik in the building. You know what I'm saying? Oh man. Miss Francis on here. Yo, Julie Winchester. Come on in here. Aaron in the house. She's upstairs, but she's in the house, literally. All right, Brooke coming in from Central Florida. Florida in the house. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. DeMarco, come on in here. M.I. Cricket letter. All right. Brian Seal. All right. Laura Rourke in the house. Come on in here. This what's up. Jennifer, what's going on? Jennifer Shirky. That's what's up, man. Oh, man, this is great. This is great. Yeah, there you go. We got Orlando in the house. Keon Upkins in the house. Nice to meet you, brother. All excited about the conversation. You know what I'm saying? Etienne, come on in. Brian, yeah. Nashville in the house. Okay. Come on in here. Nashville. Man, this is great. This is great right here. Man, I hope y'all got your books. I know they've been out of print and out of stock and all kind of stuff. Hopefully you got your book. Kathleen, I see. Hey, my favorite mother-in-law is on. Love you. There we go. Kathleen, man, representing Central Florida. Florida in the house. Man, miss y'all. All right, Mary Lou from Buffalo. All right, Barry from Missouri. You know what I mean? CF Unscripted is in the house. Josh, ain't nobody running for mayor around here, bro. I'm not doing that, man. Listen, I like a peaceful life. You see it? Peacemaker. That's what I like to do. So being the mayor is not that. All right. That's what's up. Got Josh in here. Everybody, man, get your book. Get your book, man. It seems like there's been a lot of excitement around what people have been reading. If you haven't been able to read it, don't worry. There is no pop quiz. We're not going to give you a test. You can't fail, okay? So no worries, no shame in here. You know what I mean? Just relax. We're going to have a good conversation, though, hopefully. Yo, Allison is in the house all the way from Greenville. You know what I mean? In the house. Man, thanks for coming, Allison, and the crew. Man, it is exciting. So I keep looking over here because this is where my notes are, and this is where I can see your names and stuff. So If you've got questions, comments, anything like that, please put it in there and I'll interact with it as best we can. We'll probably be on here, you know what I mean, as long as y'all want to go. 45 minutes or so. As long as it's engaging, as long as we have a good conversation, it's all good. Remember, same rules apply. Hey, this is a civil conversation space. We're trying to engage with the content that Dr. King left us. This is one of those places where I want you to feel free to have some questions. Understand, I'm not a sociologist. I'm not a history major. I like those things as a hobby, but I'm engaging with this content just as much as you are. Hopefully, it can provide us with some clarity for everything that we have going on in this cultural moment. And so many of us are coming at this from a lot of different viewpoints, perspectives, and that is awesome. But I know for many of us, we don't have a lot of frameworks for how to talk about these subjects. And the big question of the day is, where do we go from here? And Dr. King posed that question, so I'm excited to dive into it over the next 6 weeks with you. All right. Who else we got in the building? All right. We got Shannon Piotrowski in here, Mary Lou Zale in here, Michael Gannon in here, Brian Finger is watching. Yo, thank you for hanging with me, bro. Man, good to see you in here. Alyssa Crook is in here. My man Frank Sirianni is in the building. Come on in here. Yeah, man. So good to see a lot of these names. You got to know so many of these folks. Some I've never met, so it's so great to meet some of you. Some of y'all got invited in by other friends, and some of you guys are the spectrum of my life. So looking at this list of people at different eras of my life, yo, Papa Wayne is in the building. Dennis is in the building. Timothy Collar is in the building. Come on in here, man. Man, love you too, Frank. Listen, this is the spectrum of my life right here. And so some of you have been in different seasons and eras and moments. And so this is great that y'all are all in here with me navigating this. I got to be honest with you. I literally had no idea anybody would be interested in reading a doggone book. All right. So to see all of y'all's avatars or profile pictures and y'all wanting to read this book in this climate is a huge encouragement to me personally. So I'm super excited about that. So yeah. Thank you. You know what I mean? Peacemaker shirt. All right. I'm trying to be a peacemaker for real. And it's my Enneagram number for you Enneagram people. So yeah. Man, this is awesome. So hopefully you got your books. Here's a couple of things you can do for me as we kind of let a few more people come in. If you invited somebody into the group, remind them to do the questions so they can easily say that you invited them or they saw my post or whatever. So it's no big deal. It don't matter who invited them. I just need to know somebody invited them. If I don't know them, that's cool. And then because we want to make sure that this remains a safe place for people to have this discussion. And then, just tell them to hit those questions because I got a few people that are still in the little wanting to come in. And I'm like, I don't know you and all that. You look like a nice person, but they got to hit those questions so that we can give them access to come on in. So if you invited somebody and you're like, man, where are they at? Just remind them like, yo, listen, make sure you tell them I invited you. Second thing to do. All right, Miss Kathleen is in the house. Thank you for coming and hanging with us tonight. It's 9:00 my time. I know some of us are coming from all over the country. Yo, Jeremy Dixon is in the place. Jeremy and Christina Dixon. All right, Jeremy's in the house. Man, if I missed you, it ain't because you know what I mean. I just missed it. That's all. But so happy y'all are engaging in this content. Now, if you saw my original post about this, I saw as the Ahmaud Arbery shooting took place and his murder, and then Breonna Taylor, and then George Floyd, which has triggered all of these various protests around the country. And what I saw on social media was a lot of folks posting various things, where there was a Bible verse, or, oh, my man, Torrin Bird is in the house. Torrin is in the house. Listen, I know Torrin from back when I was a young man. You know what I'm saying? I'm not an old man, but I was a younger man. You know what I'm saying? Back when I was 12, 13 years old, back at Jerusalem Church of God in Christ. You know, some of y'all have heard me mention that, but Torrin was there with me, sitting in those back rows in that hot church. You know what I mean? So, Torrin, thank you for coming through. Andy is in the house. Good to see you, Andy. But as I was saying, so many people were quoting different things. Maybe a Bible verse, love your neighbor. Maybe, a cliche or something, we should be nice to one another. And then all throughout there, I would see a lot of posts with quotes from Dr. King. And in this era, we have mastered the art of going on Google, finding a quote that we like, and then just posting it. And my issue with that is I have read several of Dr. King's works. I realize many of us have not really marinated in it, engaged with his work. Maybe we've seen a video clip. Maybe we've seen or heard the I Have a Dream speech, or maybe we've seen the various quotes of his, but we've not actually engaged with his long form work. And we have a rare thing. This is a rare jewel, because this book was written just a year before he was assassinated in Memphis, Tennessee. And this was his kind of vision, as they had made some accomplishments, as we saw in the first chapter, had they seen some accomplishments, but then he's beginning to focus his eye on what is really going to take for us to see America be its absolute best. And so I read this book a couple of years ago, highlighted it, but I just felt this need to re-engage with it, because I see a lot of polarized voices. I see a lot of emotion being expressed, but many of us, honestly, if we're real honest, we don't have a lot of good frameworks for how to process these things. We've got our feelings, we've got our experiences, and we probably have some loose knowledge about maybe sociological, institutional, philosophical, and political ideologies. But to be able to be able to actually sit down with Dr. King and be able to ask him, essentially, where do we go from here? What do we do next? That's what this book is we get the chance to sit down with Dr. King and be like, man, help me to process what you were thinking about in these critical moments and what you saw in America. And so that's why I'm so excited that you guys are all on this journey with me. And we're on this journey together to try to figure this stuff out. And it's not saying that we're going to figure out all the answers. This isn't necessarily some kind of movement that I'm creating, but this was a space I wanted to create to just create a space where, man, people could really process some ideas from one of our most profound thinkers and one of our most profound and clear leaders of the 20th century, of the civil rights movement. This man he made history, and it will ring out for a very long time. And we are a product of the history and the sacrifices that this gentleman made, Dr. King. And so to be able to walk through his work together, I think is a huge privilege. And thank you for walking with me as I'm your tour guide in this. All right. So this week we read chapter 1. All right, we got Miss Jonice. We got Jonice Rogers in here watching. Thank you for coming in. And and this will be recorded. So if somebody missed it, or if you're gonna miss a part of it, don't worry about it. It's being recorded. I think it's being recorded. It's being recorded, I think, and we'll post it afterwards so that people can see this broadcast. All right. But this week we walked through chapter 1. Chapter 1. Where are we? And I think that's a great question that we need to consider, because many of us were caught off guard as the riots and the protests and the uprising and all of that stuff jumped off. And so this is an appropriate question for us to all kind of wrestle with, is where are we? How do we get to this point? Now, of course, this is 1967. This is 1967. He's thinking about 1966. He's thinking about in this particular space. And we also have to remember, as we talk about Dr. King, he was public enemy number 1. All right. And as much as we have kind of sugarcoated his message, as many of us saw in this first chapter, he was nobody to be played with. He spoke with truth. He spoke with candor. He spoke with honesty and clarity about the issues that were facing all of us, not just Black Americans, white Americans, in America as a whole. So, man, if there was something that stood out to you in this initial first chapter, please share that in the comment section right here so we can see it. If you've got a question, man, I mean, what do you think about that, Charlie? Whatever the case may be, put that in the comment section. I'd love to interact and engage with you. Maybe that's something that jumped off the page that you just thought was just so crazy. And then I'll kind of walk through a lot of the things that I saw in this chapter. All right. Now, I love the very fact that he gave us a frame of reference. He gave us a frame of reference to kind of understand all of this. Many of us don't understand all that happened with the civil rights movement. We saw they marched. Maybe you watched Selma and you're like, all right, well, that was cool. I think maybe a law or two got changed. And then it just nothing happened. He was assassinated. And then that was the end of it. But as we see, there was a big backlash that took place immediately after all those laws were enacted. So that's what we see in those first couple of chapters. A year later, some of the Negro leaders who had been present in Selma and at the Capitol Seminary ceremonies no longer held office in their organizations. They had been discarded to symbolize a radical change in tactics. And then who was voted in after the fact? This is on page 2 in my version of the book. It says, in several southern states, men long regarded as political clowns had become governors, only narrowly missed the election, their magic achieved with a witch's brew of bigotry, prejudice, half-truths, and whole lies. And so this is interesting to note, because as we see right now in our current political climate, there's always this tug and pull that's taking place, where you might see some kind of legislation or policy enacted, and then he's saying that, man, along racial lines, there was this kind of backlash to kind of take back any ground that had been gained. And so we've got to be cognizant of those kinds of tugs and pulls, because a lot of what I see online is people saying, man, well, nothing's really happened. Nothing's really changed. And we've all got to be honest and go, man, things are not as they should be, but they are definitely not as bad as they could be. So things are not as they should be. Surely that's not the case. And that's why we're protesting. That's why we're speaking up. That's why we're using our rights to make a difference. But at the same time, things have come a long way. Things have come a long way, and things have changed. But we also see the beginnings of just the tension, the deep residing tension that has always kind of been latent in our culture. And in American culture, beneath the surface, seems like there's always this kind of simmering anger and disappointment and frustration. And I love the way Dr. King articulated that. He said a simple explanation holds that Negroes rioted in Watts. The voice of Black power was heard throughout the land, and the white backlash was born. So there we have that tug and pull, where you have this kind of uprising from the streets by African Americans, minorities, and then you have this kind of white response, this kind of resistance to any of that change that's taking place. The public became, what happened? The public became infuriated and sympathy evaporated. So that's the hard part when we have these riots and protests, is we have these fringe folks that are protesting currently, and it is painting a picture to the majority that is watching on the news, and it's going, they are all these people that are out there destroying property. And we know just by all the protests that have taken place around the country, it hasn't been just all kinds of lawlessness and all of that. There have been those pockets, but what we see is this kind of tug and pull, this backlash and resistance to what's happening in our country. This is not new. So if you're in this conversation and you're going, man, this seems like it's overwhelming, this is a lot, this is not new. And I'm glad we've got Dr. King to help us to navigate it. Here we go on to say the white backlash has always existed underneath and sometimes on the surface of American life. So the white backlash has always been there, all right? And so what we see is, as we walk through history, we see these moments in history where there's been revolt that has been exercised on behalf that whites have exercised on against those who are seeking to gain equality in American culture. And then he goes on, which was my first question this week. Listen, those aren't test questions when I post those questions in the comment section. Those ain't test questions. They're just things that help you kind of think through the thing. But he talked about there was a first phase. There was a first phase of things that were happening. The first phase was the first phase had been a struggle to treat the Negro with a degree of decency, not of equality. And so when we come to these kinds of conversations, we've got to be honest. Like, we've got to be honest with our history, because our history, we're reaping the fruit of our history. This is the fruit. What you see in the streets, what we're seeing on the news is the fruit of our history that was planted a long time ago. And even though many of us were not even engaged in those conversations in there, we have to deal with what has been there. And so we've got to address it. We've got to groom it. We've got to cultivate it so that we're going in the right direction. But he said, man, white America was ready to demand that the Negro should be spared the lash of brutality and coarse degradation. That's great. So many times I'm seeing a lot of my white friends, my white brothers, family members feel like, man, I mean, people are just shaming me because I'm white. People are saying I'm guilty for all these things that I didn't do. And what Dr. King says is true. White America was ready to demand the Negro should be spared the lash of brutality and coarse degradation. We would all agree to that. But here's the scary part. But it had never really truly committed to helping him out of poverty, exploitation, and all forms of discrimination. So that is the problem. That is the issue that I feel like a lot of us are facing right now. I see somebody said right here in the comment section, I've been telling everyone the quote we need to hear from folks is that most Americans are uneasy with injustice, but unwilling yet to pay a significant price to eradicate it. I think that's true. Whereas, Dr. King goes on to say, man, to give voting rights, to be able to sit at the same lunch counter or whatever, that didn't really cost a lot. But what is going to be sacrificial, what is going to be hard in this conversation is paying the significant price to eradicate injustice. Another Facebook user said it like this: King sees the Voting Rights Act of 1965's and degradation of public facilities as the end of one struggle, but the beginning of another. That's true. And so if we're going to have a unified America, if we're going to be the very best we can possibly be together, we can't just settle for low-hanging fruit. And even Dr. King would say, man, it didn't really cost a lot. But what we see is, man, but we've got more struggles ahead that we all collectively have to navigate. More difficult phase of ensuring there was a more difficult phase of ensuring equal opportunity for Blacks and all poor people. Why do you think this second stage is proven to be so difficult? Now, listen, I think it's proven to be difficult because it's just hard to make amends. It's hard to take the next step. It's hard to make serious and significant changes. And so here's the thing I've said to my church. Here's the thing I say to my family members and friends. We don't fear change. We fear loss. We don't fear change. I believe we fear loss. And what I mean by that is, if I say, if I say I want to lose 20 pounds, that's a change. You know what I mean? That would be a big change for me. All right. That's a change that we need to have and we need to be willing to engage with. What I don't want to do is I don't want to lose my comfort. I don't want to do the hard things that it would take to actually lose that 20 pounds. And so what we see in the American culture and in the American society, all right, we want freedom, equality, justice, yada, 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 yada. And it's like, all right, well, hey, we got you, it's not so bad anymore. And it's like, no, I don't want not so bad. I want equality, and that is going to tax us. All right, so let's tackle that as we move forward. All right. And here's what I thought was interesting as I look over dealing with that first phase, coming to the end of that end of that paragraph. He said, it appeared as we talk about when this was to a degree accomplished, the emotions that had momentarily inflamed him melted away. White Americans left the Negro in the ground and in devastating numbers walked off with the aggressor. It appeared that the white segregationists, which in our mind today we would say are the kind of clear, kind of blatant racists, because they're saying, no, we want people to be separate. We don't want to be around black people. Black people shouldn't be around us. Those are the clear segregationists, white segregationists, and the ordinary white citizen. The ordinary folks, the nice folks, had more in common with one another than either had with the Negro. Why? Because I think there's an inherent fear of loss. I think there's an inherent fear of loss. That if I give these folks equality, if we provide help to these people, then it's going to mean a lower status of life for me. It's going to mean hardship for me. And therefore, I'm not willing to sacrifice what I have. And it's not even sacrifice what you have, it's helping somebody else to gain what they don't have. And so when we're talking about, just to be clear, when I'm talking about white, black, whatever, in these conversations, do not feel like that's a pejorative or that I'm being antagonistic. I know in these conversations, a lot of times everybody wants to get defensive and put their fists up. I'm a peacemaker. So we got to have the conversation. So don't feel like I'm trying to politicize these statements, all of these things. I'm just trying to talk. We're wrestling with what Dr. King is talking about and what he's saying and what he actually experienced. That is true to where we are. And the fruit of this conversation that he wrote about is still coming true today. All right. And so he goes on to even say, when Negroes look for the second phase, the realization of equality, they found that many of their white allies had quietly disappeared because it's hard. And what did he go on to say? But the absence of brutality and unregenerate evil is not the presence of justice. Because it's not as bad as it was, does not mean that justice is present. To stay murder or to stop murder is not the same thing as to ordain brotherhood. And what I love about Dr. King is he is not trying to elevate or superimpose white America to African Americans. He's not trying to do that. He's saying, I want the best for my white brothers as for my African American brothers. And for us to be our absolute best, it means that we dwell in a sense of community together. So let me look at what we got going on over here. Man, we got some more folks in here. Tristan Matthews is watching. Eric So, what's up, bro? Matt Stevens, Uncle Matt, love you, man. Thanks for coming. Yo, Ed, thanks for coming and checking and rocking with us, bro. Luke, I see you. Yeah. All right, Toro. Yeah, we'll wrestle with that. All right. So what we see is, man, there's y'all see me? Because I'm twitching over here. All right, I think I'm good. What we see is there's this refusal to give absolute justice. All right. And so that's what we have to wrestle with in this season. That was section 1. Section 2, why is equality so assiduously avoided? I love that. I don't know if y'all use that word on a regular basis, but that's a great word, assiduously. All right. Why does white America delude itself, and how does it rationalize the evil it retains? And the majority of white Americans consider themselves sincerely committed to justice for the Negro. They believe that American society is essentially hospitable to fair play in the steady growth and toward a middle-class utopia embodying racial harmony. But unfortunately, this is a fantasy of self-delusion, of self-deception and comfortable vanity. Overwhelmingly, America is still struggling with irresolution and contradictions. These contradictions are coming because we don't want to give up anything. All right? And so when we have conversations, and I see it all over Facebook, I see it all over Instagram, what I'm seeing is, man, America is fair. America is the home of the brave, land of the free. We don't have race issues anymore. And what Dr. King has had to pull back the curtain on, and what we see in the streets and on the news, is that that curtain has to be pulled back. And we see things are not as we would hope that they would be. Whereas 3-4 weeks ago, everybody was on TikTok having a good time, dancing. Everybody was quarantining, watching Netflix and chilling. Now we realize that, man, beneath the surface, it's not right. And there's a lot of things we've shoved under the rug. And we've got to be honest about that. No matter where you stand in the political ideology, where you stand philosophically, we got to be honest that something more is happening here. Let me see what we got in the comment section. Let me see what we got. What would MLK say would be the first steps to helping the low-income community, Black, Hispanic, and white alike, out of poverty? Man, we saw that later in the chapter, I think, where he talks about that they did a study and how it would take billions of dollars to get equal housing, billions of dollars to provide affordable health care and all of those things. It's funny because that was a lot of stuff that had been said by a lot of the presidential candidates, is we saw a lot of that stuff. But it's going, and what did he say? It's not that it takes a lot. It's going to take a lot. It's just that rich people are going to have to slow down how fast they get rich. And so it's going to mean a sacrifice by us all if we're all going to see us elevated. So yeah, great question. Yeah, so let me see here. That spreading the opportunity, championing equality, serving the Black community would have a rebounding effect after all. Couldn't quite grasp how that would play out. Is it in the sense that spreading opportunity, championing equality, and serving the Black community will have a rebounding effect after all? You got to clear it up for me, Cameron, because I don't quite get it. Do you think the civil rights movement let the foot off the pedal after some of those milestones and accomplishments? Listen, I don't know if let the foot off the pedal is the right way to say it, as much as there was just a significant shift. So we think about shortly after the civil rights movement, we had the Equal Housing, the Fair Housing Act, where a lot of African Americans would say the downfall of the African American community happened. In other words, now where you had all classes and socioeconomic classes of African Americans living in the community together, which created stronger African American communities. When the Equal Housing Act was enacted, it allowed for African Americans of affluence, upper middle class, upper class. They moved away from those Black communities, therefore fragmenting those Black communities all over the United States. So there wasn't the cohesion, and there wasn't the same values, because as we know, socioeconomics and class play into our value system. And so I don't know if there was a let off the gas because we made a couple of accomplishments. The second thing is too, Dr. King had been assassinated and Malcolm X had been assassinated, two very prominent voices in the civil rights in the civil rights movement. Then you got to think of all the deaths and murders that had taken place. That takes a lot of the steam and energy and creates a lot of fear in a lot of people. So as much as there had to be a pivot, there had to be a different strategy, because we had seen so many blatant just kind of pushes and resistance by federal government, by people, by institutions to not see the civil rights movement get any further. People need past to finding their own ways of making real money, own business. People committed to training and giving awareness to it, hands-on, the real training and building up. People got to share the bread with hard workers and not hold us, especially the Black community, because the education is behind. I feel like there's a huge ignorance to my side of life on this life. All right, so I got you. So that's exactly, in a lot of ways, that's correct. And what I mean by that is, because we have a whole people group that is legally been behind, who've been mandated to be behind. You cannot just send them out there and say, yo, you just got to go make it on your own. That's not fair. That's not right. And that's not how we've done it in the past with other people groups that have come to the United States. If you know anything about history, we know that a lot of the subsidies and GI bills and a lot of those things that were afforded to either immigrants or different people groups that came to the United States, they were given space and they were given room to be able to gain a footing in political refuge, maybe if they were running away from a communist country or so on and so forth. And so when we look at situations like this, African Americans were held back, legally held back and restrained from being able to progress in American society. And one of those things I would say is we often hear this said all the time. Well, Charlie, like my parents or my grandfather came to this country and he worked hard and he did everything and he pulled himself up by his bootstraps and he made a way, and that's where we are today. And I wouldn't be here if it were not for him. And I commend those stories because those are real, genuine stories of people that made a way seemingly out of nowhere. But when you look at the African American narrative and you look at African American history, you look at my grandfather, who was not able to buy a home, which would create equity, which was a way that they could then be able to leverage that to maybe pay for kids to get an education. When you look at when you look at different scenarios where legally you weren't allowed to thrive and grow and start businesses because there was resistance by your neighbors, by people in city council, by different areas, you weren't able to buy homes in certain areas and build equity and interest, and all of those things that we would naturally do, that we would recommend today. our grandfathers and fathers weren't able to do those things. And so now it's a game of catch up. But it's not just a game of catch up. If we're going to help one another, we have to be willing to work with those who have been wounded along the way so that we can all have a better standing. And what I love about Dr. King so much is he would say the white man is not as great as he could be until his brother is as great as he could be. And so when we look at African Americans, this ain't white versus black. It's all of us seeing the best in us together. And so we got to remember that message. Yeah, amen to the impact integrations implementation had on the community. Rebuilding a true sense of community is the geographical black community has to be a focus. I think for African Americans, we have to think like that. So what happens is when you hear a dialogue like that, you see a post like that, you go, man, they're trying to build their own thing. That's true. We need to build infrastructure, institutions, things that advocate and generate income and economics for African Americans, for our children, for our grandkids, the whole nine. A lot of what you see in historically black colleges all over the country, those were started by African Americans to educate their children when white institutions would not allow their children to be adequately educated there. And so for these communities to get stronger, I think about the city where I am, Baltimore, Maryland. I think about the communities I've grown up in all my life. Listen, there needs to be an economic base to help those communities come up out of the muck and the mire because they've been behind in those areas. Looks like your camera was unplugged. There we go. We good to go. All right. All right, who said that? We got some scripture in here. All right, Dr. Echo is in here, folks. Dr. Echo is in the house. Thank you, Dr. Echo. That's helpful. Leviticus 19:9 and 10. Deuteronomy 15:7 through 11. Listen, Dr. Echo was my professor, and he's the real deal. We're probably going to have him on to help us discuss stuff like this in the coming weeks. Listen, it says, open your hand wide to your brother. There is a heart transformation necessary to shift the mindset of the rich. Take care lest there be an unworthy thought in your heart, much to say that needs theologically. Listen, if you're a Christian or you have a Christian Hebraic biblical worldview, you have to understand there was a year of Jubilee. There was leave crops on the fringes for the poor. Why? So that there would be an equitable community. And there was a year of Jubilee so that people who were in debt could get out of debt and wouldn't have to live like that generation after generation after generation. And so we need that. If we're going to be the best we can possibly be, we don't want to see generations that keep going down and down and down. So we're not saying that everybody has to have the same outcomes. We just need everybody to have the same opportunity. And then what you do with the outcome is based on the wisdom that you were given. But it's not because we hindered you from having the opportunity in the first place. All right. So let's go a little further. Man, I love this passage over here on page 8. On page 8. And it talks about language. And we have to talk about language in this discussion because language is vilified right now. Depending on what you say, how you say it, especially in a social media environment, it means that I can castigate you. It means that I know what political party you're with. It means that I know what you think. And so words and language, Dr. Echo said this in a video the other day, words are powerful. They're filled with they're filled with meaning. And we're in an era and culture right now where we want to deconstruct words and reconfigure them. But as we look at the African-American struggle in America, as we look at the Constitution of America, as we look at laws, as we look at these things, as we create social contracts for one another to walk together in community, words are important. And so what Dr. King points out is how white America was using words and how African Americans were using words. He talks about these brief facts disclose the magnitude of the gap between existing realities and the goal of equality. Yet they would be less disturbing if they were not for a greater difficulty. There is not even a common language when the term equality is used. Negro and white have a fundamentally different definition. So we've got to be cognizant of the fact that when we're saying these words, a lot of times now, if a person says justice or social justice, that automatically means that they're a liberal or a progressive. And they, you know what I mean? They have certain ideologies and beliefs. If a person says, man, I have conservative thoughts about things, that automatically means that they're a Republican and they're a bigot and that they're closed-minded. So if we're going to have a race conversation, if we're going to talk about the laws and Constitution and America and freedom and liberty and happiness and justice, if we're going to talk about that, we've got to get a common understanding of what these words actually mean. And here's what Dr. King said. Negroes have proceeded from a premise that equality means what it says. So Negroes are operating off the premise, man, equal means equal. Equality means equality. That same footing, same standing, right? And they have taken white America at their word when they talked about it as an objective, all right? So we're saying this is a concrete reality that we should be looking at. This isn't some abstract thought. Equality means equality, like it's equal standing, equal opportunity, equal education, equal housing, equal, right? Equal opportunity. But most white Americans in 1967, including many persons of goodwill, so that's where it gets tricky. Many persons of goodwill, because I'm not saying everybody is evil. I'm not saying everybody has malintent. But many persons of goodwill proceed from a premise that equality is a loose expression for improvement. And so that's worlds apart. That's a value gap. And that's where the frustration is coming for a lot of African Americans. If you said you were going to give me justice, give me justice. If you said you're going to give me freedom, give me freedom. If you said you were going to give me equal rights under the law, then treat me as an equal human being. And so, but it has been misconstrued and politically stripped and maligned in all of these things in nuance because we're afraid to deal with the implications. White America is not even psychologically organized to close the gap. Essentially, it seeks only to make it less painful and less obvious, but in most respects to retain it. Most of the abrasions, listen to that, most of the abrasions between Negroes and white liberals arise from this fact. And so why is there this conversation around what matters and what doesn't matter? Black lives matter. And then immediately, what's the response? All lives matter. Okay, now stop for a second. Are they saying Black superiority? No. They're just saying, can I at least, one comedian said it like that, can I just get matters? If you saw the protests during the civil rights movement in the cardboard kind of cars that the men were wearing, the garbage workers in Tennessee, they were protesting and they said, I am a man, because they had to make a distinction that they are a man so that they would be treated like a man, not like a boy, not like a piece of property, but like a man should be treated, right? And so when it comes to language, that's why it's very important. So you see a lot of misunderstanding, arguments, cuss outs, franticness, disagreement, because we're taking terms and we don't, either one of us probably don't even know what it is we're grasping for. We have a sense, but until we wrestle with what that language means, we're going to continue to miss each other. And so that's what I would say about, man, civil discourse and just being able to sit across and have a conversation with somebody. For many of us, listen, I'm going to get pastoral because I'm a pastor. Some of y'all know that. If you ain't know, hey, surprise, surprise, I'm a pastor. Listen, sometimes we need to put the phone down or the computer away, and we need to make a phone call. All right? It's okay. Just because somebody has a different, they want to vote for somebody different than us, don't mean that they're not human no more. Okay, and that there's a tension in the water. There's a politicizing of everything and tribalism and fragmentation. And right now we're seeing families fragmented because they can't even have a civil conversation. And a lot of it deals with, what do you mean by justice? What do you mean by equality? What do you mean by freedom? What do you mean by conservative? What do you mean by progressive? What do you mean? And if we have those conversations, I think we can move a lot further. Yeah, Dr. Echo, there you go. There you go. The movie Hurricane, Denzel Washington's character says, words are a fist. The reason why dictators are so fearful of free speech, whoever controls the definition controls the conversation. Whoever controls the definition controls the conversation. And so we need to define definition. So he goes on to say like this: these are the deepest causes of contemporary abrasions between races. Loose and easy language about equality, resonant resolutions about brotherhood fall pleasantly on the ear, but for the Negro, there is a credibility gap that he cannot overlook. So why is there distrust? Why is there a suspicion? And now I'm seeing that suspicion on both sides. Why is there distrust and suspicion? Because what you say, I don't know if you mean what you say. And I might not even really understand what you're saying. But I want to go back to what he said on page 10. This was one of the things one of the reasons why I wanted to create a space like this, is he talked about the need for white Americans to educate themselves. So this is not only a space for Black Americans to for my friends, whoever, to read Dr. King, but this is a place for all of us to re-educate ourselves and get more in tune with the philosophy of Dr. King and how it might apply to today. He says it like this on page 10. Whites, it must frankly be said, are not putting in a similar mass effort to re-educate themselves out of their racial ignorance. So they're not doing the due diligence to address those racial ignorances. So we're not even saying it's malintent. It might be a blind spot, but now that you're aware to the blind spot, can we begin to at least look at those things, reinvestigate those things, admit maybe, hey, I didn't know, that's all right. And let's do the hard work of re-educating ourselves. It is an aspect of their sense of superiority that the white people in America believe they have so little to learn. So little to learn. The hardest thing, I've got 3 children. Some of y'all know that. I've got 3 kids. And one of the hardest things for my kids that I struggle with my kids is when they say, I know it already. What are they saying? They're dismissing the fact that they might not know everything. You're 7 years old, son. How you know? I just know that already. And that's dismissive. And so when we go, man, I already know history, we don't need to talk about that. No. We do need to talk about it, because while we're having these internal struggles and tensions right now, because we're unacquainted a lot of times with our history. If we know, man, if I put my hand on this hot stove and I'm gonna burn myself, if you forget that and never go back to it, never tell anybody about it, somebody's gonna come along and burn themselves. But because you know history and because you're aware of the danger, what do? You re-educate those around you. Do not put your hand on that hot stove because it will burn you. And some people are gonna try it anyway because that's how they are. But for many of us, we need to be re-educated. We need to know, I didn't know that. And it's easy enough to say that. We are in relationship with friends, neighbors. We might say something that triggers them, and you could go, listen, I'm sorry, I didn't know that. Man, what do I need to know now? And that's the kind of posture I think we need to have in these kinds of discussions. Let me see where we're at because I want to make sure. Hey man, we ain't covered much ground. Maybe I'm talking too much. We can't get anywhere if we don't understand each other. I believe if you seek to understand, you can. If you don't, you won't. If you never try to learn 2 + 2, you miss out on the deep stuff. Got to start somewhere and just try. That's right, Luke. Man, thank you for that, bro. That's right, man. If we're never really willing to have that conversation, we won't get nowhere. Or we only know part of the history that we were told, the history that we know, and we think we know it all. That's right. I can't tell you how many things I think I know and have to go back and refresh myself on. And this is the same way with history. Dr. Echo comes back on. Man, theological roots of the abolitionist movement and Frederick Douglass, what it is, what to the slave is the 4th of July. Listen, read that. I'm telling you, check out that link because Dr. Echo is going to put some good stuff in there. Here we go. Keon, what you got? Made the comment to someone earlier that most people are not ignorant of the truth. They are ignoring the truth. And this makes any progress hard. Right. And why are we ignoring the truth? Because we don't want to deal with the implications. It's more comfortable. One of the illustrations I've tried to use to kind of help people get a clear picture, and that's why I love movies, is The Matrix. If you've seen The Matrix, the movie The Matrix, the original joint, you remember when one of the original cast, he was going to sell out Morpheus. And he goes to Mr. Smith, and he's in the Matrix now, and he's eating a steak dinner. And he says to him, he said, man, I know this steak isn't real. I know these things aren't real. I know this is just my brain playing tricks on me. I know that woman isn't real, but it just feels and tastes so good. And in that regard, he was more comfortable living in deceit and deceitfulness and deception than he was dealing with reality. And if we're ever going to get somewhere, we've got to be willing to look reality in the face and then make the changes that are necessary. Oh man, this is a lot. Wow. Let's look at this, page 20. In assessing the results of the Negro Revolution so far, it can be concluded that Negroes have established a foothold and no more. We have written a Declaration of Independence itself an accomplishment, but the effort to transform the words into a life experience still lies ahead. The hard truth is that neither Negro nor white has yet done enough. So Negro nor white American has done enough to expect the dawn of a new day. While much has been done, it has been accomplished by too few and on a scale too limited for the breadth of the goal. Freedom is not won by a passive acceptance of suffering. That's powerful. Freedom is won by a struggle against suffering. And so that's why you feel the tension. That's why we feel the tension in the protest, in the angst. Why? Because anytime we're going to go up against powers and institutions that have been established, it is going to take sacrifice and it is going to take hard work, not just on white American and not just on black bodies. It's going to take all of us getting in this together from our different perspectives. No great victories are won in a war for transformation of a whole people without total participation. Less than this will not create a new society. It will only evoke more sophisticated token amelioration, right? The two forces must continue to collide as Negro aspirations burst against the ancient fortresses of the status quo. Listen, if we are true American, we hate the status quo. We say we hate mediocrity. We hate all of these things. And yet, many of us would settle for what we have already, which is a veneer of peace and not true peace, which is a veneer of unity and not true brotherhood. And we don't want the veneer. We want the whole thing. We want that to be our reality. And so we believe in an America. We believe in people. We believe in humanity. We believe that black people matter. We believe that white people matter. We believe all of these things, but we won't see these things unless we all put in the hard work that Dr. King invites us into. I don't want to preach because y'all know I ain't here to preach. Here's the thing. Here's the thing. Let's go down to the last page, page 22. Yet the average white American also has a responsibility. And he says that after the fact. It is understandable that the white community should fear the outbreak of riots. We're not condoning riots. We're not condoning violence. We're not condoning pillaging and looting. They are indefensible as weapons of struggle, and Negroes must sympathize with whites who feel menaced by them. Indeed, Negroes are themselves no less menaced, and those living in the ghetto always suffer most directly from the destructive turbulence of a riot. Living in Baltimore post Freddie Gray, that is absolutely true. West Baltimore is a hard place to live and do life, and it was harder after the riots than before, I imagine, all right? Yet the average white person also has a responsibility. He has to resist the impulse to seize upon the rioter as the exclusive villain. Can I get an amen? No, I ain't in church. He has to rise up with indignation against his own municipal, state, and national governments to demand that the necessary reforms be instituted, which alone will protect him. So listen, when you advocate, no, we don't want riots. No, we don't want looting. But man, we've got to get in this together and do not make it that the protesters, the peaceful protesters, are just as bad as the looters. That's not the case, right? He goes on to say, if he reserves his sentiment only for the Negro, he will be the victim by allowing those who have the greatest culpability to evade responsibility. Don't put pressure on the protester. Put the pressure on those who have the ability to change the laws and policies in our community so that we can live in a more equitable society. Social justice and progress are the absolute guarantors of riot prevention. Somebody call me tomorrow, they're going to say, hey, Charlie, how do we prevent these riots from happening? How do we stop this from going on? This isn't right. And what am I going to tell them? Social justice and progress are the absolute guarantors of riot prevention. There is no other answer. Give people justice. Provide a means of equality. Provide the things that not just kowtow to what people's demands. I'm not saying that. But the things that we have all committed ourselves to, the values we've all said that we believe and affirm as Americans, do those things for everybody. And then we can kiss riots goodbye, because there's no need for a riot at that point. Negroes, hold on to one key of the devil lock of peaceful change. The other is in the hands of the white community. The other is in the hand of the white community. Listen, we're in this together. We're in this together. Let me see here. All right, now talk. All right, man. Thank you, Tim. Jonas, thank you so much for that. Hey, Keon, amen, somebody. Man, thank you, Andy, for coming in, checking with us. Cameron, thank you. Jennifer, man, thank you. Man, you know what I'm saying? In the meanwhile, why not some protesters become bouncers? You know what I'm saying? Listen, we got to bounce out. Hey, you know what I mean? Hey, my man Rudy is in the building, came in the back door, slid in the back. Listen, I'm so excited to hang out with y'all. We could go all night. But I don't want to hold y'all up, and I want to go to sleep. I don't know. But listen, this week, read chapter 2. Read chapter 2. man, go through it. Some of y'all read faster than others, so don't feel bound by our schedule. Just come back and hang out with us and have the discussion. This next week is going to be a great chapter as we discuss Black Power. Black Power is the father of Black Lives Matter. And so if you're wondering how Dr. King wrestled through what he believed about Black Power, it gives me a framework for how I'm interpreting and engaging with those who are adamant about Black Lives Matter. And so this is going to be a great chapter. Read it, write in it. You know what I'm saying? Scroll. Mark up your book, share it with somebody, tell somebody. If you like what we talking about in here, man, tell somebody, invite them, tell them to answer the 2 questions that you invited them, and that they'll read the rules, because we want to keep this a civil and safe place to have dialogue and grow together. And I think this next week is going to be a great chapter. So listen, if you're Black and you didn't feel like Dr. King is still too soft, all right, let's look at that next chapter. If you're white and you feel like you got beat up, let's look at this next chapter, and we're going to all get beat up together as we seek to grow in where do we go from here, chaos or community. Yo, I love you, and put some quotes and comments and stuff in there, and just let us know you having a good time and what's standing out to you. You ain't got to wait for me to talk about it, but I love seeing what you guys are posting, and I'll see y'all next week. Peace.